Good afternoon. I'm Jamie Dunbar, and I'm the Vice President of Apparel and Accessories Development with Under Armour. And I'm here today to talk to you about developing industry-wide standards. Okay, I'm going to go back here. Okay, so some of you are looking for smart ways to get into 3D. You've been comparing the technology, you may be in the middle of a pilot, or you might be building your ROI. Some of you are now looking for ways to expand on what you're currently doing. So you're focusing on one or two key areas. You're looking for ways to get into those adjacencies, and you're also seeing the business catch on to the value of 3D. Some of you are looking for ways to establish an end-to-end technology platform. So you've got the technology already in place. You have a brand that's starting to acknowledge the value of 3D. And you're getting ready to scale. Well, I'm here to talk to you about some of the common standards and also best practices being used today by brands leading in this space. We'll discuss the difference between preferences by a brand and also industry standards. We'll discuss trends that we're seeing, and we'll also discuss why standards are so important and much needed. Because we believe that by utilizing industry-wide 3D standards at any level of your implementation, you'll be able to maximize your investment and build that digital platform that can support your brand well into the future. Let me make sure my slides are working. Okay, so how can we maximize the benefits of 3D? That's a question that a lot of us are asking. Well, 3D content can be leveraged from line architecture through to product development, onto sales, marketing, e-commerce, and even in-store experience, as we know. And there are literally endless opportunities to showcase those full, realistic, true-to-life assets. Certainly, a brand can tap into digital at any place in the value chain, but we believe that the real value is maximizing the technology end-to-end. We already know that other sectors like automotive, aerospace, construction, just to name a few, have already been able to tap into faster decision-making. They've been able to build better product, and they've been able to enhance their consumer experience. But in our industry, we're living in the midst of an industry shift. We're getting better, we're changing. Companies are changing, products are changing, techniques are changing, and we're all at different points. All of those different things are at different points in their own life cycle. So standards are important because a well-designed standard encourages the use of the technology. It makes that interoperability a priority. And well-designed standards means that the hardware and software are going to work more easily together, and that's something that we all want. Creators can always add innovative functionality to meet the needs of the industry, and we want them to, but we want them to do it within the framework of a cross-vendor standard. And our hope is that technology barriers are removed and they're replaced by strategies that help us drive the most value out of that user experience. So why are standards important? Well, to fully tap into the opportunity, interoperability does need to be addressed. To fully scale and grow, we must establish methods of working, and we need to speak that common language, and we need to hold ourselves accountable to those standards that we set. But to fully enable digital transformation in our industry, we need to build those standards. We know that other industries are already at a point in time where they've specified the requirements, the systems, the methods, the testing and the verification for different levels of interoperability between technologies and assets, and between those assets and the real world. Through 3D, we're finally starting to make those faster decisions because we're making progress. We're starting to build better product, and we're starting to enhance those consumer-facing experiences. Though in apparel, a healthy ecosystem is starting to develop, and we're seeing that happen, we still have a lot of work to do, so we need everybody on board. And even though the more advanced features that you'll see here today, and a lot of people will talk about in the technology and innovation tracks, they might not yet be ready for standardization, there is still a significant subset of functions that are well understood and common across multiple platforms. So we believe that it's absolutely the right time to standardize those now. So let's look at the areas of opportunity. Most of us in the room know that the digital content is a visual asset, and it can be used as that single digital file and leveraged from line architecture, product development, through to sales, marketing, e-commerce, on and on and on. And you can bring those digital samples to life, full, realistic, true-to-life collections without ever even seeing a physical sample. But at this stage of our industry's development, and we know this, we can still expect a certain level of disarray and technical fragmentation. A lot of brands, including us, use a lot of different software systems just to get the job done, and we know that we have to do that for the foreseeable future. But we do see this causing some retailers to hold back on purchasing innovative software and hardware because they're just unsure how they plan to use that digital asset in the future. So mapping that out is really important for you. And that new technology syndrome that we're talking about, that we're all experiencing, occurs during these initial phases of rapid innovation in any market. But the creation of industry standards could help us fix that. And effective standards could help us solve the interoperability pain points that are needlessly holding some of us back from being able to move forward. So we need to work together with groups that are researching how to align our current solutions and to make sure any future offerings that are developed will fit into some of these standards that are set up. In this way, interoperability is in the hands of all of us, and it's our duty to start thinking more future-focused in this space. So now, what are things that, as brands, we should align on, and what things are industry standards? So things that we should keep brand specific are like print and e-commerce standards, right? Some might not even call those standards, but for us, they're the building block. For example, like a model pose or lighting, those aren't industry standards, but they're brand standards, and these are experiences that really build into our IP. We're talking about industry standards when we talk about things like digital interchange, supporting user interface and business efficiency. We're talking about industry standards when we think about interoperability, like digital file types, material physics, and test methods. And we're talking about that when we mean embracing a single file or a single data set to simulate material drape, which we're all struggling with. And yes, this work is very fast-moving, but we need to continue to move forward as an industry to align. But at the same time, we have a call to action to technology providers to align industry-wide so that we can continue to flourish and move forward in this space. So most of the technology providers avoid me sometimes because that's the speech that we're giving, but it's such an important thing to talk about. So the product life cycle. We are seeing brands working in 3D at different places in the product development cycle, or the product life cycle, I should say. At Under Armour, we started in 2D to 3D back in 2015, and we did that because that's really our wheelhouse, because we had in-house pattern making and we had fit blocks in place, and we had a lot of early adopters within our technical design division. So like many other brands that are here today, that was really natural for us. But now we have a team to work on digital transformation. We have the ability to look at the entire product life cycle and see the true benefits. We can see the opportunity and we can see the savings at every point in the value chain. And we can leverage those standards and best practices and reuse the asset and reduce waste, and that's critically important. But whether you're starting at the beginning, the middle, or end, it's critical to build those standards in order to take advantage of that end-to-end opportunity when it's there, and as you continue to scale and move forward into those adjacencies. So the simplest way for me to have this conversation, because I'm a technical designer, is to walk you through the lens of the product life cycle. And since I specialize in development, I want to walk you through some of the toolbox example that Under Armour uses in the next few slides. So even though that's not totally standard specific, I think it's important for the conversation. Okay. So line architecture and planning. Starting at the beginning, why would line architecture and planning be something to talk about related to standards? Well, we have the chance here to apply the try before you buy concept and only make what data tells us is a win. We all want that. We have the chance to define cost targets and quantities here, and we have the chance to plan collections across divisions, brands, product categories, right down to specific styles and colors, and even more. And this early decision-making leads to alignment and speed, but then what? Well, it's what do you do with that file next? You need to be able to reuse that digital file. In fact, just to get that work done, we've already employed thousands of standards just to kind of make that thing happen and make it look good. But to use the file next in the development process, we have to have a way of bringing that asset upstream. For instance, if the planning team is using just 3D, maybe they're using a machine-learned model, maybe they're just using an animation model. And then we want to use it in the 2D and 3D process, there's waste that lives there. So if you want to ensure that the file can be converted into a standard format, you got to be thinking about that asset reuse. Now, design and development, within this space, we use what's called a 3D toolbox. And that toolbox houses our digital assets, including avatars, fit blocks, materials, color and print palettes, trims, and also something that we call virtual quality. And with the use of these standards and best practices, teams can create optimal workflows around these tools. So the toolbox is built and set up to be used, and then we build the processes around the tools. And what this does is it enables us to create those consistent VR assets across software platforms because we built this and we designed it to be agnostic. Having this in place has truly increased our virtual capacity, and it's allowed our organization to accelerate and scale at a much faster pace without sacrificing our quality. Lacking this, we would have really struggled with a much slower and more ambiguous digital transformation. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. Okay, now avatars. So an avatar, that's one of my favorite topics. It can be used for fit, for marketing, and in the future, maybe even for predictive product testing. We hope that this is something that's coming our way, though we'll always value that physical asset in this space as well. But most of us deal with the age-old problem of finding and keeping the right models across a steep range of sizes. So just at Under Armour, we make, from infant size 0 all the way up to 5X tall. So we're struggling with a really steep curve of sizes and trying to keep all of those models on point with their measurements. So we struggle with scheduling, high model cost, and whether you're using ASTM, parametric, or custom, we believe that these virtual assets help us get to this sizing conversation a lot easier. And all of those are issues that are solved by the use of standard avatars. Up until recently, the file management of all of our model assets was a full-time job for one of our teammates, and we felt that that really wasn't the best use of this really smart 3D teammate's job. So what we've done is we've nominated the Alvin On Body platform so that all of our users can align on and use all of our digital assets no matter what 3D program that they're using or where they are in the world. So that's really streamlined our process flow, and it's given us a lot nicer tool to work with. So we'll touch on fit blocks. Just like in the physical world, fit blocks are an effective starting off place for vendors who are creating these virtual assets for us. And along with being able to provide avatars and fit forms, we've done a ton of work to convert our physical block library to be a digital block library. And the example here shows you kind of what that looks like. We have a portal that people can access those assets from. And we've made this available in this database, which can be easily shared internally with our designers and other technical designers, and also with our vendors. But having these blocks pre-stitched and colored following our virtual quality standard, as you can imagine, has helped us accelerate our virtual turn time, and it's really helped cut down on duplicative work. And as we increased our VR fittings, we performed tons of internal research to establish a process that works best for our designers, our product team, our sourcing team, and also our tech designers, because we want to work in this solution, and we didn't want to cultivate any distrust around the digital file versus the physical, so we really cared about what that workflow looked like. And ultimately, we feel that this aids us in better product decisions, and then ultimately higher adoption rates from our design team to our technical design team. So during the virtual fit, the team will review styles in a standard format that we've built. It's kind of like a style guide. And then the designers will make any comments similar to what they would do in a physical fitting. So in addition to establishing this aligned VR process, it was also critical that we relooked at our calendar, because what was happening was that, imagine we get our physical samples in 2 to 3 weeks, and then we're getting those same virtual samples in 4 to 7 days, right? our calendar wasn't designed to do that. So we were doing and planning other activity within that same period, and then those assets were just sitting there unused because it wasn't a calendarized process, and that was a big risk. So luckily, we were able to change that, and now that process is working much better. Okay, materials. It's certainly one of the most widely discussed problems requiring standards, and I think the IKEA example this morning was so fascinating, and I think it illustrated that so well, that, you know, how we still have hard parts that we can work with, but still this material physics is a challenge for all of us. So digital materials are the basis for great 3D apparel in both footwear and apparel, but because of the high variability and material properties and test methods, our industry is facing challenges in translating this physical testing into the virtual world. So luckily, the 3DRC Innovation Subcommittee is working on methods to standardize material data platforms, and they're suggesting efficient, high-quality, cost-effective test methods that can be used across platforms. And I know that there are many other people that are working on that as well. So we're hoping to see movement in this space pretty soon. But the 3DRC has a strong collaboration underway, and the committee is making progress on interoperability for use by all of us. And for that reason, we do anticipate voluntary adoption of these standards by a number of stakeholders. This will help because it'll drive reliance to those standards and delivers more widely available, flexible options, which is critically important. And you'll hear more about this in Sandy's presentation. But for now, I will say that Under Armour, within our toolbox, we have about 50 core materials. And because of the limitations in software programs, we do feel that gives us enough flexibility to drape the majority of our product. So trims, within our toolbox, we have trim and part standards. With a fully populated toolbox, we'll literally have thousands of possible components. So this is an area where we use both stock and custom parts. And it's a place where companies like Thread and zipper suppliers could really step forward to help us provide those digital assets that they have likely already created within building their 3D parts. So that would be something we'd love to see. And at Under Armour, we've had to build our presets and our standards for things such as lighting, camera views. We've done our render presets here. And all of these things are to allow for all of the assets coming in to our pipeline from various programs and vendors all around the world to be in a common visual and a common render standard. And I'm sure that you can start to see that building this foundation has been important for us because it does take a lot of the time up front, and we have invested a lot of time here, but we believe that once that heavy lifting is done, it's easy to maintain season over season, and it's also easily scalable. So we do recommend that someone is nominated as a librarian or administrator of some of these tools because, simply put, you know, we want to make sure that it's really a robust tool that's customized for us, and we want to make sure that it works well for everyone who's going in to use it. And then lastly, within the toolbox, virtual quality. And it really is about setting the visual standard, and that is through the expression of the brand. Virtual quality expectations are established against a universal platform. So what that means is to deliver on this, a few things are required. The first is a software standard. So this is a list of our preferred user settings that standardize elements like lighting, color, and stitch application to allow for those consistent stitch files and formatting. And the other type of standard is we've kind of defined as a quality standard, and these are our guidelines for our 3D prototypes that allow us to have visual cohesiveness, consistency, and it's also what allows us to bring those assets in to evaluate them for fit. So imagine if we're bringing in all of these digital assets and the hood looks a little bit different over here, and this hood's better from this vendor. Our designers are going to lose patience with that very, very quickly, and they're going to stop looking at the assets. So it's in all of our best interest to bring these assets in looking cohesive very early in the process. And having these standards in place has level set some of those conversations for training our teams on what is a VR sample and what should it look like. So it sets us up to be able to bring those assets up or downstream when we want to be able to do that as well. Okay, so let's ask ourselves, what are some of the impacts of standards? Well, a well-designed standard encourages innovation because it's specifying interoperability. It's not mandating implementation details. All of that is still open. Well-designed standards accelerate functionality and enables hardware and software to work more easily together. And it also allows for a cleaner workflow, which is in all of our interests. So the benefits are many, and it's also for many. That's why so many companies are investing serious time and effort collaborating to make the best possible standards for our industry. And I can say with certainty that building these standards in the design and development process phases enables scalability. At Under Armour, this is really kind of where my specialty is, so we're pretty deep in this space. And recently, I'll give you an example. I spent some time traveling to our vendors overseas to talk to them about digital standards and quality. And at one factory, just one showroom over, a very influential retailer was in there working with assets in the line planning phases, which I thought was fascinating. And they were completely assorting their collections entirely virtually and only adopting, what made sense for them. We were there talking to the vendor about quality. And then I got a call from a person from a company that I had just worked for telling me that they were also working in that vendor space. So what does this tell us? It tells us that we're all asking the vendor to do something for us in 3D. And the physical process has been going on for 30 years, so we all know how to do that. It's pretty standard. Even though we might have different quality standards, we all know the conversation. But that isn't the case for VR. So we have a tremendous opportunity to calibrate in this ecosystem. Many of our vendors already had skills in 3D, and some of them we needed to completely onboard. But to build our virtual capacity, our vendors need the right people, just like we do, with the right skill set, which is very different from that traditional sample sewer and pattern maker. To empower our vendors, we need to provide them with this 3D development strategy that allows them to scale with us. So we can't just expect them to start scaling without us providing more details about our business plan. So now imagine each of the red t-shirts represents a vendor building 3D assets for Under Armour. But imagine those same vendors creating assets for a yellow t-shirt brand, a blue t-shirt brand, a white t-shirt brand, and so on and so forth. So how do we scale if we're all competing for those finite resources? We know that this is a new and limited workforce, and at this point, vendors aren't yet able to capture economies of scale or achieve an ROI. So we're all in this white space together with various software requirements. We're using different types of assets, different material testing requirements, and different virtual outcomes. So what would happen if we all aligned on a common language? Now think about it a little differently. If Under Armour has, let's say, 20 vendors onboarded, all creating assets on behalf of our brand, and those assets need to come into the pipeline entirely usable for all of the reasons that we previously discussed. Without the toolbox standards we talked about earlier, that would simply not be possible. And capacity and skill means scalability, and that's something that we all want. So what is another thing that a vendor can do with a digital file? Well, one of the things is they can focus on digitally centered manufacturing. Let's make sure my slides get caught up here. So in other industries that are further along in this path, a smart factory uses advanced algorithms and AI to perform tasks like creating schedules or managing workflow. In other industries, humans are working alongside robotics on assembly lines. And in other industries, those connected technologies that we're talking about are allowing us to increase productivity and increase speed. So though we're not there yet in our industry, this speaks to the opportunity and for reasons to ensure that our industry standards are there to leverage these future technologies whenever they're available. So in the workforce, brands, academics, and vendors all need this common language regarding skill set and capability, kind of like a standard. So I chair the 3DRC Education Subcommittee, and I work alongside many active participants that are also passionate about scaling the digital workforce. So we know that a technically savvy workforce is needed to drive the adoption of 3D technology. We know that with targeted training and development and also certification programs, that educators, brands, and retailers and also factories can start to upskill more. And we think that we can help align this through certification. But we also know that at the academic level, those entering the workforce need to be ready with current skill set. On the brand side, we need to train both our existing workforce, but we also need to hire those that can support our future digital initiatives. And the vendors are developing a completely new workforce, and they're building capacity at the same time. All of these require common language around expectations. And certainly software providers already have certifications built for their specific platforms, but we're talking about industry certification that provides a basis for a new workforce. So if you'd like to join us in these efforts, please reach out. We're at a really exciting point in our ideation, and we're ready to get to work on some of this. So please reach out if you're interested. In the world of sales and e-commerce, here content is king. And as the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And as much as we want them to, and as much as standards are important to those creating and scaling assets, the sales and e-commerce teams don't really care about the standards. They don't care about interoperability. They do care about digital transformation and how it will help them stay competitive, though. And nothing creates more pull for digital product creation than that merchandising and sales team who realizes that having these high-quality photoreal assets early in the season could help them solve a multitude of problems. And quite frankly, that's how we got started in this space, is because we were able to bring these digital assets up to sales. So we think that the sales team does understand this concept, and they can prioritize 3D development at scale, and this will allow them to gain significant leverage. We know that brands that can deliver these realistic, seamless pieces of content early in the stages, like line architecture and product development, can create these consumer-facing experiences that will delight their shoppers. And it'll also provide them with a way to give more valuable product content and information to the consumer that wasn't previously available. So my point here is that retailers and brands that begin the journey now will be well positioned to meet consumer needs and expectations in the future. So digital showrooms. Understand where you are and where you want to go. So if you started with this siloed effort or a simple software implementation, it may be time to go back in and understand the total business opportunity. If you want to do something like build a digital showroom, standards have to be established. And with any project, it's important to know the value and the purpose and why you're doing it. So the digital showroom is really the new retail format, and it could bring us even closer to our consumer. It provides unique product views. It takes that reliance off of catalogs and physical samples, and that's the big conversation. And when it's really well done, you have a more efficient and much more accurate buying experience. So we're seeing a few retailers leading in this space. Most of them are here, but this process can take a while. Because any new type of innovation takes a lot of development, start working on it now. But by implementing technology on the front end of the product lifecycle with an implementation strategy in mind, you'll have many more benefits to be able to share with your business. So retail and e-commerce, this can certainly be created at end of life, and some might even argue that you can just build this as a digital asset alone, but it's much more valuable if the file was enabled throughout the product creation process. The enhancement of e-commerce files can be placed in these real-life environments, and they can be manipulated for various product views. Providing the consumers with this elevated type of experience helps fuel confidence, and it drives conversion. While amazingly, at the same time, it's lowering product return. So I say, what is not to love about that? And in the past, e-commerce has certainly had its limitations due to the consumer's desire to take that item and study it from all angles prior to purchasing it. But now consumers can experience the beautiful 3D product that's also interactive. They can rotate it, they can zoom in and they can zoom out, and they can even view that product in motion. And they're voting on this interactive representation, and we know that because of conversion rates. So some might argue, again, that this isn't fully dependent on interoperability, but like with retail, it certainly makes sense to look at it through the lens of the digital transformation. And then the Made For movement shows us that there's been a shift back toward valuing personalization. For customization and personalization, that process does begin with standards and interoperability. That's required very early in the product development stages. So knowing ahead of time what and how much consumers want can lead brands to produce in more precise quantities with a more consumer-led point of view and avoid those high inventory and markdown levels. So these are some of the standards and best practices to consider when building out your technology platform. And what this demonstrates is that if you follow some of the proven paths that you've seen in this presentation and some of the others that, the other great presentations that brands are presenting while they're here, we'll be confident that you can have some quick wins that you can pull off that will get the attention of your brand. And we've talked about things that will make your digital transformation faster. We've talked about places where brand standards can help drive how we show up to our consumers. And we've talked about places where we need industry to align. Think about what would happen if we all aligned on the creation of digital assets. Think about what would happen if we aligned on training and certification. And think about what would happen if we all worked together and we started to demand interoperability. Because at Under Armour, we believe that by utilizing these industry-wide standards at any level of your implementation, you'll be able to maximize your investment and you'll be able to build that digital platform that can help support you well into the future. So that's all I have. If anyone has any questions before lunch, I'd be happy to take them now. Thank you.
Thank you, that was great. So I'm an academic, so I'm very interested in your training and certification piece, and you mentioned reaching out, so how do we go about doing that?
You can look on the 3DRC's website, or I can connect with you after that, and a lot of us are in the room here. In fact, we had a really awesome session yesterday. Sarah Crossley hosted it with Shimmy Technologies at the New Lab, and all of it was really a brainstorming session that is building on some of the work that we're doing on the certification process. So we have multiple project streams underway that are kind of all leading up to kind of a best outcome. And that work stream is built of academics. It's built from some industry input, meaning even software providers. It has brands present. It also has factories. And we're looking to round out people who are sitting at the table because we want to have a lot of point of view, the end outcome being high adoption of the certification. So thank you. Anybody else? No?
Hi.
Hi there.
Thank you for that. Just a quick question. How can we guarantee that the standards that we are creating are not going to be just for our own company, but it will become industry-wise? How can we guarantee that?
Yeah, I think it is by brands coming together and working together on some of these platforms. And I think the 3DRC has had a way to bring these important topics together. So there's an industry committee working on innovation, there's one working on technology, and there's one working on education. And within the framework of each of those committees lives these different work streams where brands are all sitting at the table having these conversations, and you can start to kind of debate the merits of different ways of working. At some point, though, I think what we're finding is we have to put a stake in the ground, and in order to put the next stake in the ground and then continue to move forward. So certainly there may be companies that don't agree, with that path forward, and I could see myself arguing that, from a brand point of view myself. But there's more value in getting that alignment and moving forward and inching forward than maybe each of us working on a disparate thing and then not getting aligned. So, this is my opinion and the opinion of a lot of people, but it doesn't hold us back from being able to work on innovation separately and finding those little nuggets and helping us cultivate those and bring the industry forward as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. You said that the use of 3D models had some positive effects on conversion. Can you be a little bit more specific about that?
Say that first part again for me.
You said that the use of 3D models on your e-commerce, on your website, I assume, had a positive effect on the conversion.
Okay. So we are working on that. We don't yet have all of that up ourselves. Part of this is all a work in progress, but we're seeing that in other sectors. We're seeing that in other areas of the market, where if you're able to really drill down and understand what the consumer is looking for, what they really want to buy, maybe even what size they are, what their shape is, we learn more about the consumer, we're able to drive that conversion more. So by getting that consumer data earlier, having those data-driven analytics in the mix, we're going to be able to further define what our customers want, both at the end user level, but also people who are buyers and people who are putting our product out there in the market. Do you have any other thoughts or comments that you want to share about that?
No, well, apparently it's future. You don't have to.
I think there's a lot of people that are working on it right now, and we have a lot of intel, but that's kind of some of the secret sauce too. That's part of kind of what lives in people's innovation space in some ways too. Yep.
Hi, just to build on your presentation, I'm Carol McDonald. I'm co-chair of the IEEE Committee for 3D Body Processing. So we're kind of the scanning to avatar. And one of our goals is actually working with the 3DRC and also the suppliers of scanners to make sure that the information that comes from our portion goes to your portion, and so everybody's talking together. But I just wanted to bring that we have a lot of different companies involved to let you know that it's an industry-wide that we're coming together. So
yes.
If you feel like, hey, I need something on this, contact basically either
absolutely.
of us, and believe me, we'll get you. And we're always looking for people to help on standards, so we'll be glad to keep you busy. So
Yes,
just to let you know.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. Oh.
Should I shout it?
Maybe.
So I'm coming at this from the viewpoint of a multi-brand retailer, an e-commerce company. And I think this is hugely valuable, particularly for us, in having this kind of standardized kind of 3D platform in terms of how we get the information. Right now it's very, very manual, and every single different brand and different company is providing us information in different ways. And I guess what I'm curious to know is forward thinking, if, like, do you see a future world where somebody like an Amazon would dictate these standards if the industries and if the brands don't actually come together to do it on your own?
That's a bit of a political question,
Yeah.
but
I don't mean to be controversial.
I do think that the more of us that align on a common platform, the better, because I don't think anybody wants to have one position dictated. And we all have great experience in this space, and we all have something to add to the conversation. So I think it's in the interest of us to all collaborate and not have one group dictating the conversation, right? Because, similar to the Human Solutions presentation, which I love, and as we start to launch new size strategies, man, it's tough because we all want our consumer to be able to align and go into the store and easily find the right size. I don't want my sizing to be different. I don't want, to the consumer to have any difficulty in being able to buy my product. So I think more alignment in the industry is only going to make us better, and it's going to allow for the e-commerce world to flourish. So certainly it could happen, but I hope it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We all set? Okay. All right, thank you.